Hello, and welcome to our weekly dialogue with Helga Zepp-LaRouche. She's the founder of the Schiller Institute and the initiator of the International Peace Coalition. Today is November 12th, 2025. I'm Harley Schlanger, and I'll be your host. You can send your questions and comments to Helga via email to questions@schillerinstitute.org or post them on the chat page. Now, Helga, over the last weeks, there's been a remarkable increase in the circulation of ideas previously introduced by Lyndon LaRouche, yourself, and the LaRouche movement. We spoke with you last week of Pope Leo XIV's discussion of Cardinal Nicholas of Cusa and his scientific philosophical development of the method of the coincidence of opposites, which was introduced by Nicholas in the middle of the 15th century and revived by you 6 centuries later. Also of note is the interest in the Bering Strait Tunnel, which became a discussion point around the Putin-Trump meeting. And this, of course, is a kind of great projects that Lyndon LaRouche and you have long favored as the basis for peaceful cooperation. Last weekend, there was a conference in Paris, which took up the necessity for the creation of an international youth movement with a leading focus on the development of Africa. Can you give us your assessment of why it was necessary for this conference and how it went?
Well, it was necessary because I think the world needs to go in a different direction, or at least parts of the world need to go in a different direction. And the coincidence of opposites as a new paradigm of international relations, is on the table, but unfortunately the Western countries are opposing the cooperation with the global majority and in this way preventing the emergence of a new system. So the whole idea is that the young people of the world, the young people of the global South, but also the young people of Europe and the United States, they must take a much stronger role in leadership because it's their future. And I think that the so-called elites of the Western world, who are now in a warmongering mode like we haven't seen it probably since the 30s, have no right to destroy the future of the youth. So we had this incredible conference in Paris, and I can only suggest to all of you, our listeners and viewers, take the time and go to the website of the Schiller Institute, where you will find, maybe not immediately in all languages, but in English for sure, and then soon in German, French, Spanish translations, this conference, which was an extraordinary event. It had speakers literally from all, except Australia, all continents, 4 continents, and many young people. And we had 2 days of very, very intensive presentations, strategic thinking, the dialogue, and then especially the young people took to the streets in Paris to organize more young people. And everybody came back completely excited. There was a lot of reports about the camaraderie and brotherhood feeling, and just total joyfulness about that young people are just not so burdened with all the prejudices and crimes of their ancestors of the past, so they can communicate in a completely different way. So I think this conference was the 3rd one this year of the International Schiller Institute, the first in New Jersey, in New York, in the United States, the 2nd one in Berlin, and now the 3rd one in Paris. And if one looks at the process of these conferences, it is, I would say, really rare, if not unprecedented, density of concepts, of ideas, of dialogue on a very high level. So I think people should really go to this conference site or go to the Schiller site and take some time. Everybody has some downtime in the evening or on weekends, or read the articles or read the speeches, because it did not only present a strategic assessment from different angles, from different countries' perspective, but it also had in-depth research about the history of ideas in the whole world, Europe, but also China, Latin America, Africa. It was just a waltz. And naturally, we had beautiful music. We had 2 concerts and many other performances. And it was just very, very rich.
Well, from what I've seen on the videos, they're very good and very provocative. We have the first question from someone from the Cameroons about the conference. She wrote, "I could not come to the conference, but was inspired by watching the videos and seeing some of it on YouTube. What plans do you have to follow this up? And can you provide some speakers if we set up an event like this in my country?"
Yes, we can. Not one speaker, but many. You can have speakers from all our international movement and our contacts, who I think are getting more and more excited about this perspective of building an international partnership of world citizens, people who regard it as their first identity to be a world citizen, therefore, not be a chauvinist, not be a nationalist, my country first, but be first a world citizen. But that must not be in contradiction to being a patriot of your own country, provided that you define the national interest in cohesion with the interest of the one humanity. So our next plans for that are, we want to have an international youth Zoom conference probably in December, and then hopefully soon again physical conferences, but the building for this will be first of online. So if you have concrete suggestions, get in contact with our organizers, and we will help you to set up a conference. We can, whatever topic you want to discuss, I'm absolutely sure that we can do a good job in helping you.
Well, she also wrote that I know from going to your website that you have plans for most of the world. So I'm sure that there's something that's relevant for people in my country. Now, the next question comes from a longtime contact who said, "Harley, I heard you say yesterday that the leaders of Europe intend to continue the war against Russia and Ukraine. Can you ask Madame LaRouche for me what they hope to gain by continuing this senseless slaughter?" And there was a second question similar. This is from someone who identifies himself as a Ukrainian living in exile. And he asks, by what sorcery is V. Zelensky remaining in power?
Well, look for the British role in any spook sorcery. You will be probably, you will find something. No, I think it's, I and many other people, including from other countries, are really at a loss to understand what is going on in the minds of the people who are pushing this militarization, confrontation. The German media, for example, if you read some of the headlines of the last several days, Russia can attack tomorrow, Russia will attack immediately. The more moderate ones say it will be in 3 years, but it's absolutely insane. There is no evidence whatsoever that Russia is intending to do it. Many military experts of the highest qualification have pointed out that Russia neither has a reason, because why would they want to attack when they already have the largest country in the world? They have 11 time zones. They have 150 million people or so, which is really very thinly populated. I mean, if you have 11 time zones and you only have 150 million people, you don't need new territory. They have all the raw materials on the planet. They need foreign investment, but they don't need more territory. And why would they conquer Germany, which has no raw materials whatsoever? I'm just saying it does not make sense. I think it has something to do with a completely different motive, and that is that the establishments of these countries who are pushing the continuation of the war, they have so much invested in the NATO narrative that they cannot think anymore. They cannot think, and they cannot see the changes which have taken place. I mean, the reality of the matter is Russia cannot be defeated militarily. Forget it. It's a nuclear power. They have a technological edge on weapons, on nuclear weapons, on hypersonic weapons, on submarine weapons like the Poseidon. They have the Oreshnik, they have the Burestnik, I hope I'm having it right now. These are hypersonic weapons which can not be defeated really, because they are nuclear powered, they are maneuverable, they don't have a ballistic trajectory. So the idea that you can defeat the strongest nuclear power on the planet is just madness. And then you look at the German economy. I mean, Mr. Merz, who is, one of the so-called coalition of the willing. I mean, what is the German economy able when, because of the totally stupid and incompetent economic policy of this government? The IFO Institute, that's the Institute for, in any case, it's a leading economic institute sitting in Munich. They just put out a report saying that the German industry is in a agony, that the different branches, the representatives are so desperate and so demoralized that they just see their country and their industry falling apart without moving, at least not at this point. The entire German economy is collapsing. There will be no militarization, because you cannot have a militarization bringing up a shrinking, collapsing economy up to parity with economies like that of China. Forget it. Europe is already isolated, and it's highly dangerous. They can, together with the war hawks in the Trump administration, who unfortunately are also quite active, they can create a global catastrophe, but they cannot win. So I think it's a form of madness which has gripped these people, because they obviously own their career, their prestige, their privileges, their entire position, to a narrative which was wrong. It was the idea that after the end of the Cold War, you could have a unipolar world dominated by the NATO countries. And that is clearly not the case, because NATO is also collapsing. It may not look like it, but if the economies of the NATO countries collapse, what can you do? And likewise, the EU is in a process of disintegration. So it's complete madness. And the best thing which could happen is that many citizens in these countries get together with us and suggest that we change the direction and that we adjust to the changed strategic situation, which is, instead of confrontation, have cooperation with the countries of the global majority.
Well, you can see the madness and the desperation in some of the proposals coming out from the United Kingdom. An article talking about the importance of going to war against Venezuela so that the U.S. could pump massive amounts of oil from Venezuela to bring the price down to hurt Russia. And then the other proposal was the idea of basically fencing in Russia by closing off the Baltic Sea. And there were British soldiers actually practicing boarding ships in Estonia. So the question that came in on this is, how can the British put themselves forward still when their economy is in shambles? This person wrote that the British economy, he bets, is worse than the German economy. But I don't know if you want to debate that. But clearly there's a miscalculation across the board here.
Well, I think the role of the British is becoming very, very crystal clear. Not only do you all the time have these scenarios, either have nuclear brinkmanship over the Crimea, or now having a land invasion in Venezuela to start exporting Venezuela's oil to ruin Russia. I mean, people may remember this movie, Dr. Strangelove. And, it is that kind of a mindset that, people are sitting in some bunker and then coming up with crazy ideas of how to rule the world. I think the role of the British has become so obvious that I do not foresee a good future, because once people start to put together the history of the British Empire, it may not look so pretty for them. And I think the mood is just developing, because if the British, having no empire left, pretend to still rule the world through the Commonwealth, through the IMF, through the World Bank, and now increasingly through AI and the military-industrial complex, this is a bubble, and there is no real physical economy to back it up. So I think that, the more these desperado scenarios are being pushed, the more the British are inviting the rest of the world to tell the story of colonialism in Africa, in India, in the opium wars against China. And, that unfortunately goes up to the present time. So maybe that's just causing such a reaction.
Well, we did get a message from our friend Helen in Smolensk, who said she could not watch the conference Saturday evening because they didn't have internet due to the drone attacks by Ukraine against Russia. So that's worth noting. Smolensk is close to the border of Belarus. Now, there's a question here, because there's a lot of questions about the economy, but there's a question from a supporter in Switzerland who attended a meeting I addressed on Saturday. And he said, in the past, Lyndon LaRouche advocated the debt bomb, the cancellation of debts, rather than austerity or bailouts. Why are you not calling for this again as a way to bring down the corrupt central bankers?
Well, I don't think Lyndon LaRouche ever called for the debt bomb. As a matter of fact, he always proposed an orderly reorganization. And then Wall Street interpreted some of the motions in this direction as the debt bomb, but it was not like that. For example, in 1982, when President Lopez Portillo of Mexico had asked my husband to come to Mexico to help him to defend the Mexican economy against the capital flight out of the peso, we indeed did go to Mexico, and Lyndon LaRouche not only wrote a program for the defense of Mexico, but for all of Latin America, which was called Operation Juarez. And then Lopez Portillo started to implement that program. On September 1st, 1982, he started to impose capital controls, basically to prevent the capital flight. And I remember this very well, because at that same day, my husband and I had a meeting in Frankfurt with a leading bank and their entire management. And while we were just standing there greeting each other and so forth, the main exchange trader stormed in the room and said, "Oh, the debt bomb, we are finished, we are finished." And we were smiling and said, "No, don't worry, it's not the debt bomb, it's a proposal to have an orderly reorganization of the debt." Because if you remember, at that time, the Latin American countries had about 200 billion foreign debt, which is peanuts as compared to today, but at that time it was a lot. So what my husband proposed, to reorganize that debt, turn short-term debt with high interest into long-term credit with low interest, and using that credit for investments in the real economy, and that way create a real economic motor to bring the economies up, and therefore be able to pay down the debt at a long-term, over a longer period of time. So it would have honored the debt, except, it would have enabled the economies to do so by building up the physical economy. So naturally, the fear of the Wall Street was that they would lose their high profit, quick profit money machine, and therefore they called it the debt bomb. But we never proposed the debt bomb. I just want to make that clear, because if you just declare a debt bomb without a positive idea of how to reorganize it, you can create total chaos. What would you gain by that? You would have a breakdown of, everything. And I don't think that that would be a good idea to do. I think what would be a good idea is to have, a discussion, preparing the four laws of Lyndon LaRouche, which the first one reintroduce Glass-Steagall on a global scale, nationalize the banks in every country, have a national bank as a place for the issuing of new credit, and then have the cooperation among these national banks constitute a new credit system. Now that's essentially what the countries of the BRICS and the SCO are doing right now. And the West would be very well advised to just indicate that they want to cooperate and reorganize their bubble, the everything bubble, which is becoming completely unmanageable. And if you don't do what I'm just now talking about, it does have the danger of an uncontrolled explosion, which could bring down the whole world economy and much with it.
I'm very happy with your answer, because that's basically what I told him, that unless you have an alternative system, you don't want to just blow things up. Now, here's a question for you from a transplanted New Yorker, I guess someone who used to live in New York. She says, Helga, what are your thoughts on our mayoral-elect? Is he an Obama type, or might he be a real agent of change? Mandami.
Well, I don't know yet, it looks very promising, but so looked Obama, and Bernie Sanders looked promising in the beginning. So I do not know. I think, it depends on a lot of factors, but I think it depends also on citizens to, hold his feet to the fire, so to speak. Because, what he said sounds very good. I think, the fact that he got a lot of the Jewish vote is also very interesting. New York has a lot of Jewish voters. You can see the freak out by the ADL already. They called for a sort of block watch system to report on Hamdani, which is unbelievable. So I think, there is a good prospect of hope. But obviously, he is mayor of, or he will be mayor of New York, I think from January 1st onward. And if he wants to implement what he has promised, he will have a big fight with Wall Street, which is obviously in New York. So that is a big one. And that does require a lot of support for if he is serious about it. And it would call for a lot of mobilization of citizens around the world to make sure, that is the change what people want. So, I always, when there's a new candidate where you have reasons to hope, I want to give him the credit of doubt, but it will not be an easy thing.
Here's a question that I found quite interesting from a podcaster in the United Kingdom. He said, I'm having trouble placing you, the LaRouche movement, on the left-right spectrum. I know that's not how things work, but here's my problem. Where does China fit? Is it still communist? You say it's an example for developing sector countries, and it certainly has been a success, but how would you describe their economic system? And this is important because it works and people want to know.
Well, I think that the best approximation is really the early American system of economy, because, what China has been doing, while they, on the one side, do give credit to Karl Marx, they are, in my view, 90% Confucian, because the whole approach is not class struggle, it's harmonious development. So that is more Confucius than Karl Marx. Their economy is very much, directed credit, so to speak, for furthering everything which is innovation, scientific and technological progress. So it is really more what Alexander Hamilton proposed for the United States, what was then repeated by Henry C. Carey It is much more what Friedrich List described as the difference between, you read Carey and Friedrich List and their descriptions about the difference between the American system of economy and the British system of economy, where the American system was devoted to the development of the citizen, because the citizen and their creativity is the only source of wealth, because it is the creativity of the individual which contributes to the increase of the productivity of both the labor force and the industrial capacities, and that creates profit and that creates general welfare. As compared to the British system, which is free trade, it pays no attention to the development of the citizen, but it pays attention to the control of trade. And, it's the old Margaret Thatcher formula: buy cheap, sell expensive, and the margin is what you make money out of. And in the meantime, you make derivatives about it, and derivatives of derivatives and derivatives. So that is the source of profit. In the meantime, it's derivatives of AI investment, military industrial complex investment. So it's the combination of AI and military expenditures, which from a standpoint of real economy is a complete waste. Nobody can eat cannons, so it's it's that difference. And if you look at that, then China is absolutely going in the direction of Alexander Hamilton, Henry C. Carey, and Friedrich List. And that is, in my view, I think this right-left characterization was always stupid. That when it comes from the seating order in the French National Assembly shortly after the French Revolution, and that is sort of so outdated. I think it's much more adequate to say that forces or countries are for development, for the common good, or oligarchical. I think that's a much better separation. So from that standpoint, China is effective, progressive, for the common good, and people in China are much, much, much more happy than people in Europe, for example, probably like the United States as well. And for me, that is always the telltale. If a country is governed good or bad, I think the result is the happiness of the people.
Now, there's one more question, which I found interesting also, that just came in. Someone who identifies as a young person, and he said, "I've heard Mrs. LaRouche talk about Confucius quite a bit. I have no idea where to start to study Confucius. Could she give me some advice?"
Well, there are several books by Confucius. They are obviously, not very. They're difficult to read because they are not really developed. How should I say? They're not. Just read them. It's more like shorter descriptions of ethical behavior, but you get a good entrance, and then there are some very good biographies and historical studies, and then naturally many academic articles. So I think the best thing is to go to the LaRouche EIR archive, put in the search engine Confucius, and then take it from there, because that's always a very good way to start.
Well, and I think that's important, because if you talk to Americans and ask them if they've read Hamilton, they'll say they don't understand the language either. So it really requires just taking the commitment to jump in. Now, there's going to be another meeting of the International Peace Coalition on Friday. And this has become an increasingly important institution for a real dialogue. And what are the plans for this week, Helga?
Well, I'm sure there will be a certain amount of report back from the Paris conference, because that was a clear effort, to answer the war danger with an extended peace movement by creating a new paradigm based on the Kusa idea of the coincidence of opposites, which has many echoes in, peace proposals like the Global Governance Initiative of Xi Jinping, the Peace of Westphalia, and so forth. So there will be a report back. Then I'm absolutely sure that there will be a report on the horrible situation in the Middle East, because there's the annexation of the West Bank going on. Naturally, the humanitarian aid getting into Gaza is minuscule. There is the danger of a partition of Gaza. And the latest thing, which I have to verify, is I saw a photocopy of a letter signed by Donald Trump from the White House to President Herzog, demanding the exoneration of Netanyahu, but with official stamps and everything. So I don't know, that sometimes you are speechless about these. So there will be that will be a big topic for sure. I think that we will also naturally discuss the situation in and around Venezuela and the effort by the neocons in the Trump administration to form an anti-BRICS, anti-Lula, anti-China alliance in Latin America around the Venezuela developments. That will be a topic. And I can already announce that on our EIR platform, which we are expanding right now and will have a lot of live top interviews, we are planning a special seminar on the situation in Venezuela. So go to our website and look out for it, because we will put together some of the top experts. You know that the VIPs, the Veterans for Sanity and Intelligence, have written an urgent memo to President Trump to not go for this Venezuela invasion, because there is no good option for the United States to come out of it. So that will be a big topic as well.
There's one other question that came in while you first started discussing this about Gaza. Trump promised there would be no annexation of the West Bank. And the question is, do you think Trump will do something to stop that when the settlement movement around Netanyahu is already taking more and more land?
Well, if that letter which I just mentioned is true, maybe he made a deal whereby, he does something, but I'm less hopeful. I think Trump right now is being surrounded by a lot of elements in his administration who are more in line with the previous Biden administration than what Trump's intention were when he started off his second term. I can only hope that the better elements in his administration get on the offensive and make sure that he can fulfill whatever he wanted to do when he came in office in January. Right now, it looks very much in danger.
Well, thank you, Helga, for joining us today. We'll see you on Friday. And I think in the meantime, people should go to the schillerinstitute.com website and watch some of the videos, some of the coverage of the Paris conference. I think it'll be quite inspiring for people.
Yes, do that and join us.